Uh, we now move on to the 19th module of the course in Applied Linguistics of the UGC E-Pathshala program in the domain of linguistics. This particular module is devoted to something that we have already referred to, called the post method era, or what is post method. And we will try to talk about that very briefly in this module. You see, if you begin to think about language teaching, then a focus on language teaching must be as old as language itself, because people speaking one language from one community must have run into people, hypothetically, but one doesn't see any other choice, must have run into people from another community who speak another language. So there must have been an effort on the part of one to teach the other its language and so on, or from their context there emerges, as we know from social linguistic theory and practice, there emerges a new pidgin Creole and a new language is created. So these are all linguistic processes, but we know that, certainly we know there is recorded evidence since the classical times, for the past, let us say, 5,000 years, we know that there was a conscious effort at teaching classical language. And obviously there were methods adopted to teach those classical languages, and we have talking about these in the earlier module. This is one. Secondly, we have also been trying to show that at any point of time, any method of language teaching that is used is influenced by a combination of sociological, historical, political, technological, psychological factors which converge in a particular way at a particular point of time to give rise to the dominance of a particular method. It's not that other methods completely die down, or that teachers become some kinds of slave to that particular method. No, there has always been a diversity among teachers, because you see, the bottom line, and this is the bottom line of Kumar Vadivelu's suggestion also in the post method, the book on post method, that the bottom line is that there is a teacher and there are children. Nobody knows the class better than the teacher. So don't go around sermonizing the teacher. You can give ideas to the teacher. You can suggest new readings to the teacher. You can demonstrate certain things to the teacher. But what she will do in the classroom eventually, and in a long-term perspective, in a structured timetable, in a 40-minute class, is her business. And probably nobody knows it better, or nobody can make her do better except giving ideas and suggestions here and there, and sharing, narrowing that gap. You see, what we have been doing for a very long time is to increasingly increase the gap between a university researcher and a school teacher. What we can do is to try and build theoretical frameworks from classroom reality, rather than imposing some kind of theoretical frameworks on the classroom realities without appreciating, analyzing, understanding the classroom experiences. So rather from theory to practice, we have to talk of a theory from practice, or theorizing from the classroom, as a very famous article is called Theorizing from the Classroom. When we have also, in the earlier modules, talked about how language teaching methods were very deeply influenced by behavioral psychology, by structural linguistics, by the cognitive revolution that Chomsky initiated, and by various sociological factors or political factors such as a world war, all these things. But when we begin to talk about the post-method era, we think of Richards and Rogers' 1985 book, in which they make a very fundamental and I think a very useful distinction between approach, design, and procedure. I think these are fairly standard classification recognized among applied linguists, and it's useful to begin to appreciate their distinct identities and their networking with each other. You see, approach subsumes all the theoretical principles and all the philosophical underpinnings of a particular idea, of a particular suggestion towards language teaching, a particular approach. That's why it's called approach. That what are its psychological dimensions, what are the sociological dimensions, what are the philosophical underpinnings, and so on, and what are the linguistic, what kind of linguistic theory it subsumes. What does it, for example, believe about the question, how do children learn language? Or how do children learn a second language or foreign language? All these are issues related to approach. Following from approach is the issue of design. That if this is the approach, how do you design your curriculum? How do you design your syllabus? And more than that, how do you design your classroom practices, your classroom materials, your textbook, your units, your lessons, and your exercises? So this is the design. And procedure is how do you actually transact them in the classroom. The actual classroom transaction is a part of the procedure. So we have talked about all kinds of methods, direct method, grammar translation method, audiolingual method, computer-assisted language learning, communicative approach, and so on, and Krashen's monitor model we talked about earlier. So there are all kinds of methods. But coming to post method, this is on your screen. This slide is on your screen in front of you. The famous work, well known, done by an Indian scholar, highly respected in the field of applied linguistics now, Kumar Vadivelu, in his book on post method in 2006, says the following: we have been awakened to local exigencies. Very important thing, sort of elaborating, if at all we want to theorize from the experiential reality from there. But he says, in spite of all these theories, we have now been awakened to, because of the new things happening in the field, that there is a multiplicity and diversity of identities in the classroom, the multiplicity of languages in the classroom. So we need to take note of that we have been treating the teaching community as a homogeneous community, or the teacher belief systems as something taken for granted, which is not true. Every teacher has his or her own set of beliefs, or assumptions about children, about learning, about language, about the nature of language, about the structure of language. And all those have to be negotiated if we want to make an intervention, if we want to start a dialogue. We need to first recognize and respect our set of beliefs. And similarly, there are a variety. Major lesson learned from the World War, the major lesson learned from the intervention of technology, that there are macro structures. Technology is a macro structure. World War was a macro structure, or let us say the social structure of society is a macro structure. Now, these macro structures influence the classroom. influence the micro things happening in the classroom. And we need to recognize that. From the social, cultural, political, and historical perspective, they shape and reshape the microstructures. So these ideas we owe essentially to Kumar Vadivelu, and now they are part of the common sort of understanding of people working in applied linguistics and language teaching, and also in other areas where application of linguistic theory is required. In the next slide that you see on your screen, there is a slide on your screen, and you will see that we present in this context a minimal model. A minimal model that anyone, either a teacher or a teacher trainer or a linguist or an applied linguist, should keep in mind. So at the center of this model is the learner. So never ever forget the learner. If learner is out of sight, then the whole project is doomed to failure right from the beginning. Okay. So the learner, her interests, her motivations, her attitudes, her needs, her challenges, they have to be kept in mind. Most of all, it has to be recognized that all learners, by the grace of nature, as a gift of nature, are equipped, come prepared with a learning potential. So learner has to be at the center of the whole enterprise. And on the right side, you see the psychological aspects, which we briefly talked about, aspects like attitudes, motivations, myths, stereotypes, beliefs, and so on, and the social aspects. What kind of a background child comes from? What kind of beliefs he brings with him? Is he or she from a minority section? What are the specific situations related to girls? Or what are the specific issues that relate to so-called disabled persons? We have been trying to say throughout this course that there is no one really disabled. If we adopt a policy of inclusion in the true sense of the term, then we must include the whole world rather than discriminate, separate, and sort of exclude people from what we begin to call the mainstream. It is the mainstream which is in, if you think of the minorities, and if you think of girls, if you think of disabled, if you think of the low caste, and if you think of the poor people, it is the so-called mainstream which is at the moment excluded. But it is excluded in a privileged way. For God's sake, let us include everybody and have an inclusive society. We need to keep the teacher in mind, as we talked just now, and we need to keep the materials. So there is a bi-directional arrow. I think in your printed material, there will be bi-directional arrows on all these, that they are very closely networked. The learner, the psychological aspects, the social aspects, the teacher, and the materials and the methods that she uses, they are very closely networked. So what are the main features? What are the main features of the post method project suggested by Kumar Vadivelu? They are again listed on your screen, and I'll run through them, but please look at your screen. This slide should be on your screen. On the screen you see that he says that there can be no fixed method for all the diverse contexts. So there has to be a sort of fundamental eclecticism built into the whole project of language teaching. We should try to eliminate the dichotomy between the researcher and the teacher, a point that I've already elaborated on. The teacher knows her classroom and children best, so leave it to her, she will handle it. Linguists, psychologists, and educationists can only give her new ideas and new materials, and then leave it to her what to do with it. He provided a kind of a framework which is discussed in great detail in his extremely widely read book now, And this framework is located in three main features, and they are the features of particularity, practicality, and possibility. Now, the feature of, once again, this is the slide on your screen. The feature of particularity is pedagogy has to be context sensitive. First of all, and this I have been trying to say from the beginning, that unless it is a holistic perspective and it is context sensitive, language learning will not take place. Okay, it has to be in a certain context. It should have the feature of practicality. The teacher should be encouraged to theorize from their practice in their own classrooms. It should be practical in the sense that teachers should be able to do it and then feed into the theory rather than accept the theory lock, stock, and barrel. That should not. It should be in the realm of possibility. So the socio-political resources of learners are leveraged in the classroom as a catalyst for identity formation and social transformation. It should not be the case that the social structures are made in such a way that all that is suggested to the teacher is by definition impossible. So I think we should rethink the issue of imposing the same method on all teachers and all children. And the main message of the post-method era is that let the teacher be eclectic and let the teacher decide and provide her the best possible inputs from all resources and also provide her the best possible infrastructure, because she cannot do more than what the infrastructure provides her. So don't expect miracles to happen in a vacuum. Thank you very much.